Rebecca, do you just want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I look forward to being with you for the next hour.
And Rebecca has joined us very early from Baltimore in the US. Thank you for making the time for us. Thank you for, we always like to believe that there is no better time than now to discuss reading. It could be middle of the day, it could be midnight, but this whole passion for reading kind of keeps us going. And we're so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
It's lovely to see that the number of participants keeps increasing. And yeah, we look forward
on a Friday evening.
Yes, before a national holiday, I might add, not only a weekend.
That's right. Oh, I think those that will join really do.
We're also, Rebecca, joined by many people from Stones to Milestones.
Fantastic.
Because it's a constantly evolving journey to learn about reading, to talk about reading, and we don't get to do it enough with people with the kind of experience that you have. So I'm sure that my team is equally excited to be a part of this conversation, as are the many attendees.
All learn from each other, right? There's always
Absolutely.
a new tip that we can take into our practice, into our homes.
Absolutely. And this is, as you can see, a truly international webinar. We welcome Richard from Zambia. And thank you for joining us at this time. We welcome all the teachers and principals who are joining us from across India. It's fabulous.
Welcome.
And it's 6 and we shall start. I will also like everyone to know that this webinar, Pradeep, and very, very warm welcome to Rebecca. Rebecca Chandler-Leege, the Chief Program Officer at Worldreader. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Pleasure to be here.
I will do a very quick introduction of Rebecca's. She has over 20 years of leadership experience. She leads Worldreader's Global Impact team. And together as an organization, they seek to create a culture of reading, to ensure everyone has the access to good reading material, to ensure that everyone enjoys reading. And she leads the content, the digital programming, and the impact evaluation teams for Worldreader. Most recently, she's led World Vision's engagement in All Children Reading, a grand challenge for development, which was a global initiative of USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government. So a really multi-dimensional, multi-country effort. And the purpose of the point of this vision is to kind of, talk about how innovation and education technology can address the crucial issue of child illiteracy. And Rebecca has also worked with World Relief before, initially in Rwanda as the director of programs. And then she moved on to become the director of global program operations. She has lived in multiple countries, in multiple continents, rather, I can say, over the course of her career. And good news for all of us is that she's visiting India for the very first time next month. So Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure to even prepare to talk to you. I think I'm very, very excited. And as you know, tomorrow is a very important day in our history, because it's our Republic Day, and a lot of us will remember. We of course celebrate it in every school and in every community. But I have a special story about it, which is my grandfather was in his early teens when India achieved independence, and in his early 20s when the Constitution came into power, and he was just going to college for the very first time. So left home in a different city in this anglicized college, didn't know how to kind of navigate himself, and he told me then one day I just walked into this room and I could not believe a library could be so magnificent. It was, he was describing everything to me with large shelves of books and wooden staircases and just an amazing system in which everything was organized, right? Which was so rare for us in those days. And since then, he's always told me to appreciate reading and to respect a library when I see one, and respect the effort that people are making to bring reading to the world, to bring reading to children in the world. And I'm so glad that, I'm thinking of him, I'm thinking of reading, and then you're here in front of us to kind of help move this conversation forward. So Rebecca, I think we should just just jump in.
Great.
And is there anything that you'd like to share before we jump in?
No, I just think that's a wonderful opening to the conversation we have, because it really is on the basis of reading that we begin to empower a nation.
Yes.
And as you think of, as you mentioned, what a special time in your country
Yes.
tonight, as
Correct.
you're about to celebrate 70 years. That is tremendous.
Yes.
And
It is
so much
crazy.
rich history
It's
that has gone
amazing.
on. And joy for me to be with you this evening. And as we were just talking about India's 70th Republic Day, what tremendous history and vitality as a nation you guys are bringing to the globe. My name, as Aditi said, is Rebecca Chandler-Leege, and it's my joy to connect with you on several fronts. One, as a mother of 2 young children, and I've included a picture of my children for you. There they are. Julian is 6, and my daughter Estelle is 8. Obviously, I'm a parent, I'm a wife, and I'm also a former teacher of English as a second language. I'm sharing my picture of my 2 children because I think as parents, we connect and we bond across the globe on a lot of matters, but particularly on the value of education for our children. So first and foremost, I also want to express my appreciation for the great work of Stones to Milestones.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You guys are doing amazing work. It's leadership such as yours that propel us as parents, teachers, and our children to a stronger and more productive society. And you know what else I really appreciate about what you're doing, Stones to Milestones, is for bringing the parent back into the endeavor of language learning for their children. Yes. I'd like to begin with a story, an old folk tale of the magnificent lion and a little field mouse. One day, a lion was sleeping soundly when all of a sudden a little mouse ran over his face. The lion rose up and was about to kill the mouse. Then the mouse pleaded with him, "Oh, please don't kill me, spare my life, and I promise to repay you with some kindness." Well, the lion thought that was very funny. He was so large and the mouse was so small, and so he decided to let him go. Well, it wasn't long afterwards that some hunters captured the lion, and they bound him with strong ropes. Well, the mouse could hear the roar of pain from the lion, and he came immediately, and he realized that he could help. And he began to chew through the rope, and he set the lion free. Well, the lion, as you can imagine, was so surprised, and he thought it strange that a mouse could have helped him. And he realized that in unexpected ways, people or activities or actions can be very helpful. Let us, as we talk this evening together, never underestimate what something small can do to help one another. Stories are powerful, just like the one Aditi opened for us today. Well, a critical component to storytelling and of child development is really the power of language development that reading offers. Just as Aditi and I have told you a story, have you ever told or read to your child, niece, or nephew a student or a story? Suddenly their eyes got large, right? Their full attention was on every word you said or read. And then as the story concluded, what do they want? They want you to continue it. They want you to repeat it 10 more times. I'm sure we've all experienced this at least once, if not many times in our lives. And are you ready today with a story if a child asked you for one? But why is storytelling or reading such a moving activity and fundamentally so important for children as early as birth? It's because it's through this language exposure that the children's cognitive and language develops right from their first breath. You will all know the description of Abhimanyu listening to conversations and learning from inside his mother's womb. The earlier we begin to tell children stories, to engage in language that describes everyday aspects of life, we're expanding their minds to the unknown and imaginary worlds, the broader and more quickly the minds of our children develop. Dr. Patricia Kuhl. She's the co-director at the University of Washington Institute for Learning and Brain Science. Her research on behavior and brain studies has shown that this very, very, very early investment in language development of our children is a predictor of their language skills as early as 18 to 30 months. And it's also a predictor of their pre-literacy abilities by the age of 5. Several other studies have also found similar conclusions, and all of them emphatically say, calling us as parents, teachers, regardless of our socioeconomic status, the location and where we live, to begin proactively in language development of our children, either through reading or storytelling. This does lay the cornerstone for an empowered nation. So let's build on the idea that developing language is fundamental to a literacy predictor, but it also aligns with the child's cognitive development. What is cognitive development? It's a child's ability to understand, to process, and to produce language. Based on the English language, children have a vocabulary of around 900 words by the age of 3. And by 6, their spoken vocabulary is anywhere between 8,000 and 14,000 words. This is known as a language explosion, often between the ages of 3 and 6. Angela Oswalt, she's a licensed social worker and an early childhood specialist, noted that between infancy, at birth, through the ages of 2 to 3 years of age, these young children, as we know, understand far more than they speak. We know that children understand when we're talking to them about what they want to eat, even if they're not responding at 1 year of age. However, the language explosion allows their expressive abilities, that spoken language, to catch up with their comprehension. In order, though, for their spoken language to catch up to their comprehension, children do need access to vocabulary. And the most common and engaging way to develop vocabulary, these language skills, is by interaction, dialogue, storytelling, and reading by parents and caregivers. Building language skills informs cognitive development. It expands the children's ability to think about thinking. That's a very critical skill early on. And simply stated, we are helping our children train their brains to utilize them for greater processing. Obviously, the more that these children engage and practice these skills, the greater the development. This interaction is enhanced with storytelling and reading. And it has become so validated by science that pediatricians in the United States, even my own pediatrician for my children, have prescribed to their parents the need to storytell or read to their children at a minimum of 20 minutes a day. Now, some may ask, particularly in countries like India, where you're learning English, you're bilingual in the home, are there negative consequences? What we're finding is that past assumptions are being dispelled with research. John Best from the Washington University of St. Louis, Missouri, noted in a paper entitled Relations Between Executive Function and Academic Achievement from ages 5 to 17, he found that children who were bilingual, their executive control is central to academic achievement. And in turn, academic success is a predictive factor of long-term health and well-being. In short, children that were bilingual had mastered more elements of their life and development. So the value of reading, is it transformative in all aspects of our life? It certainly is. We have witnessed over the last 25 years, governments, multinational organizations, non-governmental organizations, and community-based organizations have invested not only in education, obviously, of these generations, but more in importantly, in the ability of these children to read. Most of us know that this has been further supported by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which reads, ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. Education without learning how to read is really similar to creating a generation that remains blind to not only the benefits of society and the doors reading opens, but it limits their ability, society's ability to contribute positively to the greater good. The revered Mahatma Gandhi, he so eloquently said, a language is an exact reflection of the character and growth of its speakers. So how can a nation be empowered without a concerted effort to reach each generation with language and cognitive skill development from birth? Well, it's through early childhood development to develop these literacy skills for life. Why is literacy and that ability to read so transformative? I think UNESCO the research summarizes it very, very effectively. One, it offers cultural benefits. Literacy can help challenge attitude and behavioral patterns. Reading helps develop skills to critical reflection and often termed experiential learning, learning by doing. And it's access to diverse books that values of equity, empathy, inclusion, peace, and respect for cultural diversity are promoted. I think simply stated, a reader, even a child listening to a story being read, can begin to imagine himself in the footsteps of another. 2, there are social benefits. UNESCO's research articulates that many social benefits are made available by literacy. Maintaining good health. We recognize that people need to read medicine bundles, prescriptions. They need to be able to understand and comprehend health messages. It reduces child mortality, and it raises healthy children and ensures likely that they will be educated. Creating a stronger next generation is fundamental to empowering a nation. 3, economic benefits, for sure. It has been studies upon studies have shown that individual and national economic growth is directly attributed to education and literacy. One of the studies UNESCO cited is from Azerides and Drazen in 1990. And while it's a bit older, I think it is so fundamental what they found. Countries that experienced rapid economic growth based on technology transfers had first achieved a literacy rate of at least 40%. This was a finding reminiscent of the 1960s economic history studies of modernization. And finally, there are democracy benefits. In an article published in January 2018 in the journal Taylor and Francis on language, cognition, and neuroscience, Dr. Volk Hüttig and his co-authors argued that literacy impacts not only individual minds, but also society and humanity as a whole. A fellow author, Moray, in the same journal argued that literacy does not stop at the end of reading acquisition process, but it has profound, continuous effects on thinking and knowledge. He argues that literacy must be free to serve the flow of ideas and critical thinking, open to analysis of complex issues, and enable well-informed public debate and collective decision-making. Individuals that were more literate are generally better in participating in exercising control over the affairs of their communities, and they contribute to truly democratic governing. Literacy has democratic benefits. So where do we begin? Simply stated, we should begin as parents, teachers, caregivers at the births of our children. As Emily Buckwell, an American children's book author and poet, stated, "Children are made readers on the laps of their parents." Aditi, maybe we could progress to the next slide. I love that quote. A mother reading, or a father reading, or an aunt or an uncle reading to their children. It's very powerful. Each culture, of course, has its own unique approach for parents and caregivers to engage with their children. But science has confirmed that the more positive and regular the engagement, the stronger children's language and cognitive developments. A study by Ross and Brooks in March 27th, 2018, showed that there are positive psychosocial effects. In this study, it revealed that the benefits included social emotional competence, a quality of life, and reading interest in children. But let me add that the study noted equally powerful benefits for parents, including improved parenting competence, improved attitudes toward reading with their children, improved quality of their relationships with children, decreased stress or depression in parents. And these benefits of these studies were seen across age groups. They were also seen across various ethnic and racial backgrounds of the parents included in the study. But you may ask, how do we begin when there are so few books and resources available at the household? We do know that access to books in the household is a prerequisite for reading to children. Yet few children have access to quality early learning in India, and even fewer have home literacy environments supportive of language and cognitive development. The 2018 Annual Status of Education Report, which surveyed over 354,000 households across India, found that just 6.6% of households had any supplemental reading materials, down from 20.6% in a 2016 survey. The same survey stated that 74% of schools had access to a library in 2018, but when the assessors came, only about 37% were using them. Solving this issue takes 21st century innovations to provide access, coupled with large-scale campaigns to empower us, me included, as parents in our behaviors and attitudes towards the value of reading at the home level. First, what do many of us value quite a bit as a tool in our everyday life? Of course, we value basic food, water, and shelter. But we often value being connected with others, and most often than not, having access to a mobile phone. With 1.2 billion subscribed active connections, India has the world's second largest mobile user base in the world. If you are listening today and you're on this webinar, you are already committed to having your children or your students learn to read, or at a minimum, looking for ways to help provide them just a bit more for them to succeed. You envision a better, more hopeful world for them as they grow. So how can we help each other? Worldreader is working to leverage mobile phones to reach readers where they are with quality reading content for their children. 3 years ago, Worldreader asked this question: could digital storybooks and mobile technology engage entire communities in India to read to and storytell to young kids aged 0 to 8? Well, Worldreader, we had to start somewhere. We worked with other local and international publishers to curate a collection of high quality, age appropriate digital storybooks in Hindi and English. Our kids collection for India currently has about 550 books. This collection is a combination of picture books, pattern books, discovery or nonfiction, fables, folktales, and it's been independently reviewed by an external early childhood development expert for gender, illustrations, content, and age groups. Next, we said, let's place them on our Worldreader Kids app. Our reading app was designed for parents to use to read to their children. It was designed around our users, ensuring that the interface is easy to use, that books can be read offline and or on low connectivity. The app is also available on any connected phone, either via our web app or directly from Google Play Store. Since 2015, our program has reached over 205,000 households in Delhi, Rajasthan, and even in the Himalayas. To ensure we reach as many children as possible, we work with a network of partners, including health organizations, schools, preschools, and also a direct-to-community approach. A significant component of our work that we do is to promote the value of and the direct reading to children. We believe in the power of traditional and also digital channels to reach parents and caregivers at scale. Channels such as radio, local cable, TV, billboards, but also Facebook and YouTube have proven to be effective in raising awareness of the importance of reading to children and encouraging parents to download the app and search for a great book to read to their children that night. Interestingly enough, there are also gender barriers we found when we started this. One, the good news was that we also saw that most frequent readers were moms. In low-income communities, women did face barriers such as access to an internet-connected phone, literacy levels, and maybe were low. There was low tech literacy levels. But thanks to hand-on support from our field staff, women managed to overcome these barriers and actually became some of the best readers on our app. As I mentioned in the introduction, I am a parent, and we often don't have all the confidence in the world despite what we try to project to our children. So let me tell you my story of reading to my daughter one night when she was about 3. A friend had handed me a picture book, and I looked at it and was slightly overwhelmed. I can't make up a story for my daughter, I thought, with these pictures. I lacked the confidence that night to actually think, would she appreciate my story? So I put the book down and picked up one that had a few words that I could read to her. Well, the next day I got thinking, here I am, very passionate about reading, and I'm trying to find the most perfect story to go with those pictures, as though my daughter thought I would be a children's book author. I realized my daughter isn't going to judge me on the story. She wants to interact. She wants to hear my voice, to hear the imagination that parents and caregivers offer. So that next night I picked up that book. I made up a silly little story, and Estelle loved it and asked for it again. Regardless of who we are, and even if we don't think we're great storytellers, we can all simply try. And the more we try, the easier it gets. I tell my own story of lacking confidence because we all need support. Worldreader has learned that users of our app use the app, our books, in different ways. Some read with the kids directly from the app. Others memorized stories and then narrate them to their kids. And we also found that siblings are very important in engaging their younger siblings. And we saw that families, extended families, participated in the reading to children, aunts, uncles, cousins. Telling stories and reading are so critical in all contexts. From preschools and schools in Delhi, to night schools in rural Rajasthan, to remote schools in the Spiti Valley in the Himalayas, what place or picture would you add to where reading can happen? We're going to take a moment here. As you remember, we talked about these campaigns, and I'd like to play a video that tells a story that I think you will find humorous and engaging.
तेरा टिफिन का है? भूल गया। फिर तो तू भूख से मर भी सकता है। तू अपना टिफिन उसके साथ शेयर क्यों कर रहा है? मेरी मम्मी ने अपने मोबाइल से कहानी सुनाई थी, जिसमें एक आदमी एक भूखे साधु के साथ अपना खाना शेयर करता है और वो भूखा साधु रिकॉर्ड बन गया फिर क्या हुआ
Oh, Aditi, you need to unmute.
के लिए अपने फोन पर read2kids.com टाइप कीजिए और आज से ही अपने बच्चों को कहानियाँ सुनाएं क्योंकि आज की कहानी है कल की तैयारी read2kids.com
That was so beautiful. such a wonderful video.
We value partnerships, and we look forward to reaching parents at scale thanks to partnerships with organizations such as Stones to Milestones. With the youngest population globally, India's youth will have a large role to play in the future of our species and planet. It's imperative that strong language development foundations are provided to India's children, not only to play an active role in India, but also to play a global role. Dr. Radhakrishna, the second president of India and noted educationalist, said, "Books are the means by which we build bridges between cultures." What a powerful and wise statement that is. I believe everyone on this webinar tonight can make a difference in this young generation and future generations with one parent, one book, one phone, one child or many children at a time and every day. So as I close, I'd really like to invite you tonight to make a 30-day commitment with me to spend 10 to 20 minutes each day reading or storytelling to young children that you have influence with. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to engaging in some Q&A, questions and answers with you all.
I think, wow, that was a lot of information to take in. And I think some of the data, right, it really speaks to itself. About what really struck to me was reading helps parents and children bond. It improves parenting experiences. We often look at reading as something that we can, that we should be doing to someone and not doing with someone. And I think that's a very beautiful kind of change in perspective that we need to bring in our own approach to reading. Yeah.
Very true, very true. It is with, and the more we do it together, meaning with our own children, the more confidence we gain. And also we learn from our little ones. And I think that's so important. It helps us expand and helps us teach in new ways.
Yes. And, we have a whole host of questions coming in, and I want to make the most of the time that we have.
Sure.
And Geeta, who's one of the teachers from a school, has asked this question, which is, especially, and this I think is a question that's relevant to every country where English is a second language. Mm-hmm. We as parents, so we as educators, always start reading or speaking with children in our own languages of love. They are our mother tongues. But and the worry is that the right approach? Because if I want them to be reading in English, should I be reading to them in English from the very beginning? But then there is also the thing that the flavor of the story sometimes doesn't come in English because the child he's not quite equipped to understand it fully. So what do you feel about that?
Personally, I think you can actually do both. So I think the most natural way to engage with your child, and if that's in your mother tongue, to do that, I think exposing them to new words and languages in English, even if it's not the perfect from your own perspective or the individual's perspective, is also great. The mind of a child can take in many, many different languages, and we've seen children around the world grow up understanding, learning 5, 6, 7 different languages at a time. The critical piece is really developing and engaging and exercising that mind early on. And you can do that in a variety of ways. Children are receptive. They're looking for that interaction with those that love them, that trust that language and that storytelling builds, that security. Those are all critical components that allow the mind And we know in that graph that we showed, the mind is pretty well developed by the age of 5.
Yes.
So we have a
Absolutely.
small window, right, of
Mhm.
building and exercising that brain.
Yeah. And you're so right. And one other question that it's so linked to what you said is that why is it still important to engage in reading, the physical act of reading, while all the stories that we want to narrate to our children are available in such beautiful audiovisual formats?
Mhm. They are, but they're not interactive, right? It's a child watching. Sure, he's watching other people interact, but he's not engaging in the one-on-one, that voice intonation from those that he cares and loves about,
Right.
and the ability to ask questions and when they don't understand, or for you to add elements to that story that would make it far more interesting and help his or her comprehension in the process.
Yeah, like we said earlier, no, it's reading with and not reading to. And sometimes I feel that engaging with a story on a screen, while important, yes, of course, it for the children, especially the ones who are kind of in the learning to read phase, it takes that bond away, so they don't realize what a wonderful community experience reading can be. And then we often have the social stigma of children who read being called nerds, or children who read.
For sure. The
Yeah.
world over.
Yes, and I'm so glad now we have Hermione Grangers in the world to kind of break that myth. But yes, the whole.
My daughter at 8 can read, and has her own individual reading time, but she still really enjoys when either her dad or I pick up a book and read to her, because you continue to inform the pronunciation, the new words and definitions. That's also important, even as they become independent readers.
Yeah. We feel that children who are in grade 2, grade 3, so about 8 or 9 years of age, should be able to read independently and read on their own. But there's a specific challenge we address, especially when we're trying to make children in kindergarten fall in love with reading, especially when they can't decode text on their own, right? So what is it that teachers or parents or educators should be mindful of at this age? What should we do to make them fall in love with reading in the first place?
I think you need to storytell. You need to hold a book and bring that book to life for children, to simplify, to explain the little words. Even if in kindergarten, a child can be taught to recognize, your small basic words. And I apologize, I do not know Hindi, but in English, right, they can start to recognize the word in and the, and bringing that out and showing them very clearly where it is in the sentence gives them an interest. They're like, oh, I just read one word, even if it's a 200-word book. I think small little things, even if they don't decode, but that visual image of you holding either through your phone reading and showing them the pictures or in a book is so powerful. I don't think we have yet even understood the science of how that translates into a certain love of reading.
Sure. So if I were to kind of enumerate the objectives of storytelling, right? It's to build language. It's to build cognition, because they're associating words with pictures. It's to build logic, because they're seeing a story move from one specific thing to another specific thing and then to an end. Of course, inculcating of values, and reinforcing the bond between the narrator and the listener, right? And Vikram, one of our attendees, had a question. So apart from all of these, are there any more objectives of storytelling?
Well, I think a critical one, and you referred to it a little bit, but it's expanding the imagination.
Yes.
Because when a kid is not yet reading, we need to open their worlds. And while some kids can't, it's like explaining an animal from another part of the world right to them. They can imagine what it is, even if they've never seen it before. And the more that we can build that, the more their brain gets trained to critically think and process. This is what happens in Australia. This is what happens in the US. They can comprehend and engage far more than we actually think they can.
And you're so right, and for us it's stones to milestones. This is a challenge that we come across every day, where we say that, on our own reading app, Freedom, we have stories available from multiple sources, and some stories would be, say, about penguins, or some stories would be about wolves, and we don't always find them in areas around us. Some stories are about children who are learning to do different things in different countries. And I think exposing children to all these new thoughts and ideas from a very young age does two things specifically. One is that it makes them empathetic to what's around them. They're so much more open to receiving different ideas and receiving different thoughts and forming judgments, and not forming judgments. I think in today's day and age is so important. And the other important piece is kind of your ability to filter information really becomes strong, right? Because nowadays there's just so much coming our way, and how do we know what's relevant? How do we know what's right? So yes,
and you need a voice. You don't need just a TV screen to tell you that. You actually need the parents or the teachers around to help offset some of all the media and noise that is coming to them.
The whole ecosystem approach, right? So why we're creating this ecosystem for young children, and we're utilizing technology in ways that we have never seen before. The question that we always have is, are screens good for children? How do we? Why don't we just read on a book? Why a mobile? What do you say to that?
Oh, I think The Economist magazine actually just put an article about the concern with screen time. This is just my personal opinion on it. Sure. I think obviously extended periods of just screen time for the sake of an option to babysit is not valid.
Sure.
But I think if you have directed engagement with your device for smaller periods of time, I don't think there's no science that says that's harmful. If you're reading to your kid off your phone, if you're asking them to do some practice games, you're getting that interaction. If they're just sitting, just taking in without any engagement, yes, that has proven to be, it looks like from some studies that could be detrimental, and then they kind of lose touch with the reality and society around them, right? You don't want to do that. But so I think
the passive, it's kind of passive consumption versus active consumption, right? And when you're consuming something around reading on a mobile app or on a tab or on a computer screen with a parent, it's more about the engagement than about oh, this is coming to me from a screen, because I think it works both ways. Yeah.
And let's be honest, we need to be very, very careful on the type of access we give to our children on any connected internet connected phone. We know there are a lot of risks, but I think if as parents and teachers, when we're using our devices in a constructive way, I don't see that that's going to be harmful for children.
Yeah, I think you're so right. We're absolutely connected there. And we all know that reading is good, that we should encourage it. But sometimes we seem to hit a wall where a child is just not willing to pick up a book, or a child is just not willing to engage in a reading-centered activity. In situations like these, what can parents and teachers do?
So I was one of those children that did not actually like to pick up a book when I was
young. And look at you. My God, there's hope in the world. I'm so happy.
A lot of confessions on this webinar today. So I was one. I much preferred to be outside, climbing a tree, running around, playing with a ball. And the thought of actually having to sit and read a book didn't seem very exciting to me. I also realized that it was probably because I hadn't had some of the foundational tools that made it easier to learn to read and practice. And so I would think that the more that we can invest in helping teach that early reading, what we sometimes call sight words, that decoding process, the alphabet earlier on will be very, very important. And it wasn't till maybe 8 or 9 that I had given some books that were of great interest to me. Some finding 1 or 2 that can pique the interest, or a story, and it may take some extra effort to find something that resonates with that child. But generally they do come around. I can't say I came around. I love to read, but it is a challenge, but don't give up. I think every kid in there really desires to read, wants to open that book. There's usually some barrier that's prohibiting them from wanting to do that.
There's a very beautiful quote that I'm reminded of. I think it was Jacqueline Kennedy who said, "Your favorite book is waiting to find you." You know?
That's well said.
I'm paraphrasing, but I think the spirit is the same. The child who does not like to read is just waiting to meet a book that will change his life. Yes. So reading as a skill, we've spoken about reading in the young age. For reading, when older children read, along with reading, what are the various other skills that they are building? What is reading really empowering them to do?
When older children are reading to younger children? I'm not sure I understood the question.
So when children who are 10, 11, 12 years of age, when they're reading themselves, they already know how to read. They're enjoying reading. But while they're reading, what are the several unconscious skills that they're building because of reading that will kind of reflect in their day-to-day interactions, in their academics? What is that?
Well, for sure, they're building they're continuing to build their vocabulary. They're building their expression to their own external expression, right? Understanding how they would like to phrase when they speak. I think we learn from how things are written and we test them out. For sure, their critical thinking, obviously, as the text gets more advanced, more complex ideas are presented to children. Yes. And that should have them questioning, right? You would like children to question and process and say, is this true? Is this not? How do I interpret? And I think that is fundamental. And as you earlier brought up, that ability to judge appropriateness of the information is a real skill that we need to continually foster with, I would say, upper primary and secondary school students, so that they are being active citizens and beginning to think through what's being presented to them.
Yeah, and this also reminds me, when I'm trying to relate what you're saying to the classroom scenario in India. We have large number of children in most of our classes. So, all of our classes maybe have 35, 40, 45, 50 children even. And with a variety of backgrounds and with a variety of abilities. So if a teacher or a librarian had to engage with so many different kinds of readers at the same time, it definitely presents a challenge. So how is it what are some of the strategies that you find practical to implement in a classroom with a variety of readers and a variety of learners?
So we have seen that in many different countries. So it's not just, we actually even have it in the United States now with classrooms of that size. And it's becoming really quite difficult, obviously, to manage. I think one of the critical things maybe is really figuring out how do you group some of these children into different levels and begin to understand some very simple assessment processes that you can target different reading levels to, and allow them to bond as a group and learn from each other in that process. I think it takes a lot of dedicated effort to think through, and it's not something that can be applied immediately. But I think if you start thinking through as part of, maybe this is something Stones to Milestones is already doing, but beginning to say, here are some tips to help identify within a large group of 50 students, the different reading levels and age group too. For sure, a kid that's 9 is not going to have exactly the same interest as a 6-year-old, right? Even though they may be in the same grade. So trying to think through some of the books, maybe there's 2 or 3 books that may be of more interest to the 9-year-old than the 6-year-old, and begin in that process. Yeah. I have great respect for teachers because it is not easy today. So if you were on this call as a teacher or have been a teacher, I have great, great respect and appreciation, because our education systems need to provide much more support. And we know that the challenges are great.
I want to delve a little deeper into assessments, right? You just mentioned we have to find practical ways of assessing reading. Sometimes what happens is that because we're not equipped to understand the science of reading, the way we go about assessing it becomes kind of reductive. So what we would end up doing is perhaps having a few children stand up and read a few sentences in class and then say, oh my God, you're not fluent at all. You don't know how to read, right? And then it kind of builds the child's fear and he's not able to explore that side of himself more. So if you were to assess a child's reading ability, what is it that you would look at?
You know, Aditi, I think there are probably those on the phone or others that could probably answer that maybe even better than I can. I am not I'm not a reading specialist in that sense to understand, and particularly in your context of your school system, I think there are different tools that are utilized. I mean, I've seen tools around the globe that are being utilized, some as simple as, just a laminated sheet of paper that everyone engages with and circles different words when they hear them just to test vocabulary. And begin to process, some kids know 5 words in this sentence, some kids know nothing, without having to stand up and really question their own reading ability and begin to bring that down. I've seen technology used, right? That's a little less intimidating, where children can kind of play a game and assess where they are, and that's been very useful. Obviously that's hard in a classroom of 70, but right,
but possible. I think possible in batches. Yes.
So I think there are different tools out there that could be applied.
What I'm really taking away from it is to implement different ideas is actually not we sometimes, because of the scale of the work that needs to be done, that itself is a fear. How will I do so much for so many? But I think it's really, really encouraging to know from you that there are always ways to start small. You try 2-3 things in a class, see what works, build on that. Where Rome wasn't built in a day, and reading can be taught in a day.
Ask for help. We all need help.
Yes.
We all need to be able to share, and I have found that anybody around the world that's in this industry, in the value of trying to teach reading, is willing to share any tool that there is.
Yes. And Project Literacy, the organization, has been doing very, very valuable work. They're doing wonderful scoping studies on what's in the world out there and what's presented to all. Stones to Milestones ourselves, we have a very India specific reading assessment which is online, and it's open for everyone to come and take. And if we have schools and school leaders on this webinar, I encourage you to look up the FAST assessment online and then do it. I think it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful tool, rather, to engage in the world of assessments. The other question, we have time for a few more, and I think the librarians in the group definitely want to know. So you have this incredible space full of wonderful books, but how would you suggest books to children? Or if you're going to buy books for a school, what are the different things that you would keep in mind while making this purchase? Because sometimes it's, that there are books out there and okay, this is a great series for kids, but you don't know if it is, if it's going to be good for your school and your library and your setting. So what is it that you must keep in mind while making these resources accessible to children?
Fantastic question. One, for those that are working in libraries, please continue. Libraries are a rich and generally very safe place to read and to get exposed to so many different ideas. And the ability for children to pick, right? Or even on a tablet to scroll through that digital library. It's exciting. Story covers, right, are very important. The cover page, right, is pictures mean a lot when you're young. In terms of picking books that children like, I think it also is imperative for librarians and teachers to really understand who their students are, to really ask questions, what piques their interest, but also to push that boundary a little bit for them. But I think for a librarian to actually understand what the book is so that they can tell the story to get them excited about opening the book as well is equally important. To be able to describe the breadth and depth of what is being purchased and what's in the library, how to bring the book alive before the child actually even opens it. It's a critical piece.
Yes, I think, apart from my parents, I owe my love for reading to my librarian in my primary school. She knew every one of us in the class. She knew what we would like. Every time there was a new book, she'd make sure to reach out to the children, even apart from library class. So she would reach out to us in the break and she would say, "Hey, Aditi, this book has come. I think you'll enjoy it." And then a friend and I would race to the library to see who gets it first. And then there was always the joy of waiting for that book that will come your way after a few people have read it. Talking about it, it makes it makes such a world of a difference.
It does, and the more you bring that alive, the more the students will visit, or the community will come in and be part and want to be there. Feel the richness of the content around them.
Yes. A couple of last minute questions that are coming in. And I'm just trying to see which is my favorite out of the lot. Just give me 1 second. One question comes from a school that I know. It's in Gujarat, and it says that what should we be a reader of? Should we be a reader of books? Because when we talk about reading, we automatically imagine books in our head. Right, but reading is of so many kinds and happens in so many ways. I for once I remember there was a boy in my class who loved to read the dictionary. Every time every time there was time, he would just open the dictionary and just like go through the Oxford word list. So what is it? What is it nice to be a reader of?
Well, I would say at what age we're trying to target. I think let them be a reader of as much as they want to read.
Yeah.
Especially early on. Obviously, if it's not harmful, let's put that assumption in. But to cultivate that interest first and foremost, they will diversify. For a long time, my daughter read a fairy series, imaginary. It drove my husband and I a little bit crazy that that's all she wanted to read. But it increased that interest. Created that practice. That practice is so important to train that mind to go through it. Obviously now she can't believe she read those. She's moved on to other things, but it really created the love. It created the practice that is so critical that children need over and over again. And obviously it did grow vocabulary and imagination through the process.
Yes. And I think parents and librarians and teachers are always worried that when a child picks a series, like the Geronimo Stilton, or I was a big fan of the Hardy Boys series, right? So when you pick a series, you only want to read books in that series. Sure. So the issue is, how do I kind of diversify the child's interest? But I believe your suggestion is to kind of let them go through it, and it'll happen.
Absolutely. Let them go through it. Let them read all 29 Hardy Boy books. By the 29th, they're ready for something else. And that's okay. There's reached a conclusion in that.
And there's also a very beautiful social component to it, because if I'm reading the Hardy Boys and my friends are, we always have something to talk about. Right. It's exactly like when you watch one movie and you want to talk about it, or you've been to a certain restaurant and you want to discuss that with somebody.
Absolutely.
I think books do such a fab job of bringing communities together. It's
very good.
Yeah, very, very, very special for us.
Practice. We know that practice is really so fundamental, and I'm not exaggerating, because there's been such a decrease in the US in literacy levels that pediatricians really have to prescribe that to parents to build that exercise, that daily exercise with their children. And so, I think anywhere we are, obviously different languages require different lengths of time, but, at minimum 10 to 20 minutes every day that's kind of set aside to work and practice through will make avid readers.
Yes. And, it's a beautiful thought to kind of bring the session today at a close. We're at 7, and I can't even imagine how time passed. It was such a pleasure listening to you. Few last words of advice, last words of encouragement to teachers and librarians all over.
One, know that your work, even if you do not see the results today, will pay off in years to come. Teachers that invest early in the child's life, even if the child is difficult or challenging or doesn't seem to be receptive, with that love and care and that constant support, they will remember and they will continue to grow.
Yes.
Be encouraged that you are having an impact. I can't imagine a teacher out there that isn't really striving for the best of their students.
Yes.
And obviously, if you're on this call this evening, you are one of those that care very, very deeply about the success of your students.
Yes.
And often when I think about this issue, I just encourage us to try and bring more friends and family and any potential stakeholder into this endeavor, because literacy is so, so critical for our future. So stay encouraged. I'm here cheering on, just like I hope you're cheering me on. And I really appreciate the invitation this evening to be part of this Stones to Milestones webinar series.
It was so wonderful to have you. We at Stones to Milestones, we like to say that our mission is, of course, to help every child become a reader and to help them find their place in the world through reading. But what we're really striving to do is make reading a part of your dinner table conversations. If you talk about it as a family, as a gathering, the child will know that this is something we talk about every day. I might as well try it. Right?
Exactly.
Because we talk about prime ministers and we talk about politics and we talk about films that have done terribly, but we don't talk about what we've read today. And I think that simple shift, that small shift goes a long, long way. And thank you so much for encouraging us, for sharing. Really, really, I really appreciate the data you shared, not only from biology to neuroscience, but also from research. And I think it's phenomenal. You have been
Join the challenge.
Incredible. Yes.
Join the 30-day challenge.
Do the 30-day challenge. Yes. Is there a Twitter handle or something about the challenge, Rebecca?
We may move. I will turn it over to my team in India to make that happen in some way.
That's super. So, whenever that's available, we'll make sure that everyone who's attending this webinar has the details. And we're all kind of rooting for this challenge. We're all joining this challenge. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you to all our attendees.